There is a place so gentle, so quiet, that the sky itself holds it like a secret. Its name is Aeloria, a village that floats not on land, but on clouds. It drifts slowly, endlessly, above the world. No roads lead to it, no maps mark it. It is a place you find not by searching, but by slowing down and listening to the silence between thoughts. The villagers of Aeloria live in homes made of thatch and silver thread. Their windows open not to streets or gardens, but to the rolling, ever-changing sea of clouds beneath their feet. Sometimes golden with sunrise, sometimes blushed pink at dusk, and sometimes just soft, whispering white. No one remembers exactly how the village came to float. Some say it was once an ordinary town, tucked deep in a forgotten valley, until one night, a lullaby so beautiful was sung, the earth itself let go. And from then on, Aeloria rose. The village does not rush. Time moves slowly here. Bells chime only when the wind remembers them. Children rise with the sun, not because clocks demand it, but because the morning smells like warm honey and old books. In Aeloria, people speak in soft tones. They walk without shoes, so their feet can feel the breath of the clouds. Each home has a garden, not of vegetables or vines, but of wind chimes, feathers, and sky-colored stones. When the wind passes through, the gardens sing. There is one path that circles the entire village. They call it the driftway, a wooden walkway that curves gently around the clouds. It creaks just a little as you walk, not from wear, but from age, the good kind, the kind that has stories. Ina, the oldest villager, is the keeper of lanterns. Each evening, just before the sky turns indigo, she lights the floating lanterns, hundreds of them, each carrying the name of someone who once passed through Aeloria in a dream. She says, "Dreamers leave behind a little light, and we make sure it keeps glowing." Ina's cottage is perched at the very edge of the village, where the clouds fall away into mist. Her porch swing never stops swaying, even when the air is still. Some say the swing rocks on memories. One evening, as the village drifted over a quiet, moonlit ocean, a young boy named Loen sat at the edge of the driftway. He watched the stars blink in the rippling water below. Or were they reflections? Or dreams? His feet dangled in the mist. His eyes were heavy, but he didn't want to sleep just yet. He whispered, "Do the stars ever fall?" A quiet voice replied from behind him, "Only when someone is ready to catch one." It was Ina. She carried her lantern basket in one hand and a cup of warm wind milk in the other. Loen smiled sleepily. He scooted over to make space. "Tell me a story," he said, "one of the old ones." Ina sat beside him, the lanterns floating slowly upward, one by one. "Well," she began, "in the very first days, before Aeloria learned to drift, the clouds had no shape. They were wild, scatter-minded, eager to race across the skies. But then came a little girl, barefoot and brave, who climbed the tallest hill in her town and whispered to the clouds, 'I see you.' They stopped, not because they understood, but because no one had ever spoken kindly to them before. She sat for many days, watching them come and go. Sometimes they rained, sometimes they glowed, and sometimes they listened. One morning, they carried her up, not high, not fast, just enough for her feet to dangle above the treetops. And from there, the clouds learned to be still, to hold, to cradle. Ina looked over. Loen was fast asleep. The stars blinked, the ocean below exhaled, and Aeloria drifted on. Aeloria was never loud, but sometimes it was quieter than usual. On these days, the wind would soften into a hush, the clouds would drift a little slower, and somewhere near the center of the village, a sound like a single note of silver would echo gently through the air. That sound was the Cloudway Bell. No one knew exactly who built the Cloudway Bell. Some believed it had always been there, a gift from the sky itself. Others said it had been placed by a traveling bell maker who once floated through Aeloria in a boat made of folded paper. It stood at the edge of a small, circular garden, a quiet place where even the clouds paused to rest. The bell was not large, not shining. It was dull silver, shaped like a teardrop, and suspended from a curved arch of smooth, pale wood. It never rang by force. Only when the air was still enough, and the moment gentle enough, would the bell chime. One soft tone, clear, light, like the first word of a lullaby. Children were told that when the Cloudway Bell rang, someone somewhere had fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep. Not a tired sleep, a safe sleep. Loen loved the bell. Each afternoon, he would walk the driftway until he reached the bell garden. He'd lie back in the grass of the floating meadow, watching the soft grasses sway like waves, waiting, just in case it might ring. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it didn't. He never minded, because the waiting in Aeloria was just as peaceful as the thing being waited for. One particular evening, just as the sky was turning a sleepy lilac hue, Loen noticed something beside the bell that hadn't been there before. A small book, bound in sky blue leather, resting gently at the base of the bell's arch. He picked it up carefully. The cover was warm to the touch, as though it had been held by the sun itself. He opened the book to the first page. There were no words, just a pressed feather, white, soft, and shimmering slightly in the fading light. Loen flipped through more pages. Still no words, only faint impressions, like the memory of letters. On the very last page, he found a note written in smooth, flowing script. When the bell rings, a story begins. Close your eyes and listen. Loen looked around. The garden was quiet. The wind was barely a whisper. He held the book close to his chest, and he waited. The bell chimed, just once, a note so soft it barely stirred the air, but to Loen it sounded like the world exhaling. He closed his eyes, and just like that, the story began. In his mind, he saw a cloud ship, its sails stitched from mooncloth, drifting through stars like a boat on calm water. There was a captain, an old woman with a crown of woven fog, who sailed only at night, collecting forgotten dreams and storing them in glowing jars. Each jar hummed softly, not words, just feelings. A lost friend, a favorite song, the quiet pride of learning to tie a shoelace, a remembered scent from childhood. She kept the jars on high shelves, stacked by the color of their glow. Sometimes, if the world below seemed especially tired, she would open a jar and pour a dream gently into the wind. Down it would drift, over forests, rivers, rooftops, until it found someone who needed it. The captain never spoke. She just listened, to the stars, to the sky, to the silence. Loen opened his eyes. The book was still warm. The bell didn't chime again. Not that night. He stood slowly, placed the book back where he had found it, and whispered, "Thank you." The grass rustled in reply. The wind curled around him like a blanket, and the clouds rolled on beneath his bare feet. In Aeloria, no one asks where a story comes from. They simply let it arrive and then let it go. The Cloudway Bell would ring again, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe in 100 years. It didn't matter, because time here was not measured in minutes. but in moments and in the softness of sound. And tonight, the bell had done its job. It had opened a story and lulled a heart. As the stars blinked quietly into view, Loen walked the driftway home, the hum of the bell still resting gently behind his eyes. Every village has a garden, but in Aeloria, the gardens did not grow tomatoes or thyme. They didn't sprout carrots or vines. They bloomed with light. At the farthest edge of the village, where the clouds dipped low and the wind grew sleepy, stood the lantern garden. It belonged to Ina, the village's quiet caretaker. The garden had no fence, no gate, just a soft invitation in the air, as if it whispered, "Come slowly and bring silence with you." Each lantern in the garden was unique. Some were round and soft like bubbles, others long and shaped like falling leaves. There were lanterns with petals, lanterns with feathers, lanterns made of glass so thin they seemed to disappear when the wind passed through them. They floated just a few feet above the cloud-soaked ground, glowing gently with golden blue or lavender light. No two ever shone the same way. Some pulsed like a heartbeat, some flickered like candlelight behind fog, and some simply glowed, quiet and still. Ina walked among them every evening, carrying her long-handled lighter, a silver wand that flickered at its tip with a tiny eternal flame. She didn't light the lanterns all at once. No, each deserved its own moment. Each deserved a name spoken aloud, a memory honored, a silence shared. That night, as the village drifted above a sleeping forest, Loen joined Ina in the lantern garden. He had never asked to help before, but something in the way the night smelled, like warm leaves and old dreams, had drawn him in. Ina nodded at his arrival, but said nothing. She handed him a tiny pouch filled with flame seeds. "Tonight," she whispered, "you light, I listen." Loen's hands trembled slightly. But the garden, like everything in Aeloria, asked for nothing more than patience. He stepped up to the first lantern. It was shaped like a teardrop, the color of faded amber. A small nameplate hung beneath it. Callan, who once dreamed of flying. Loen gently opened the pouch, took one flame seed, and held it beneath the lantern's belly. It ignited with a quiet pop, not of fire, but of memory. The lantern flickered, then glowed, casting soft light in a circle around them. He smiled. They walked slowly through the garden, lighting one lantern at a time. Each had a name, a story, a hope someone once whispered while asleep. Mira, who painted with music. Tovin, who remembered how to smile. Aeloria, who loved the sound of snow. Loen began to feel them, not as strangers, but as pieces of something bigger. A drifting collection of sleepy souls, their warmth lingering in the air long after they'd passed. Ina spoke softly after a while. "We all leave behind light. Most of us don't even know it." She paused before a lantern that flickered blue and gold. "This one," she said, "is yours." Loen stared. "But I'm still here." Ina nodded. "Yes, but sometimes we dream so deeply, our hearts leave behind echoes, the kind that glow." Loen read the plate. "Loen, who listens to the wind." He felt something settle in his chest. Not surprise, not pride, something quieter, like being known. He lit the lantern, and the garden around him brightened, as if the clouds themselves sighed in relief. They finished lighting the last lantern just as the moon climbed high, peeking over a curtain of mist. The whole garden glowed now, not blinding, not dazzling, but warm, like memories being remembered just right. Loen and Ina sat on a bench woven from soft wood and sky thread. Neither spoke for a while. Then softly, Ina asked, Do you think dreams know they're being dreamed? Loen thought. I think maybe they do. And maybe they float too, like us. She smiled, closing her eyes. Good. The garden hummed gently as they sat. No wind, no rush, just light and presence and peace. Somewhere, far below, a forest turned in its sleep. An owl hooted once, and the sky remained still, like a page waiting for the next line of poetry. Back in the village, homes dimmed, chimes settled into silence, and cloud blankets curled softly beneath cradles and window sills. Above it all, the lanterns glowed, and Aeloria, held in the palm of the night sky, drifted on. There are many jobs in Aeloria. Some people tend to the sky gardens. Some collect the dew that forms in the corners of morning. Others keep time by folding pages in the wind. But there is one job that no one applies for. One that chooses the person rather than the other way around. It belongs to the cloud reader. The cloud reader lives in the tallest tower in Aeloria. It leans slightly to one side, not because it's broken, but because it listens, ever so slightly, to the drifting patterns of the clouds. The tower is built from old wood, soft stone, and bits of sky glass, transparent shards found only during twilight, when the world seems to pause between breath and thought. No stairs twist through the cloud reader's tower, only a slow, spiraling ramp, wide enough for silence to walk beside you. Inside the tower, books line the curved walls, but none of them have titles. Their covers are blank, their pages empty, until the clouds arrive. You see, clouds in Aeloria are not just air and mist. They are stories. They carry with them memories from the world below, conversations whispered into pillows, thoughts never spoken aloud, dreams half remembered after waking. And the cloud reader listens. Her name is Imra. She is quiet, with hair like snow before it melts. Her eyes reflect the weather, pale blue on clear days, storm gray when someone's holding back tears, and gold when the clouds bring joy. Imra doesn't speak much, but when she does, it's like warm rain, soft, unexpected, and always needed. Each morning, just as the sun starts to yawn, Imra climbs to the top of the tower, sits at a round open window, and waits. The clouds arrive slowly, one at a time, as if shy. Some are small and twitchy, darting this way and that. Those are children's thoughts, quick, wild, curious. Others are heavy and slow, their edges blurred with years. These are old memories, the kind you feel more than you remember. Imra watches. She doesn't chase. She waits for one to float close enough to touch the sill. Then gently, she opens her notebook and begins to write. Loen had always been curious about her. He saw her once, many weeks ago, walking through the lantern garden with a handful of empty pages. She didn't say a word, but the air around her seemed to hold a soft hush, like the moments just before snow. So, on a quiet morning when the village was passing through a particularly calm sky, Loen gathered his courage and followed the spiraling ramp. The air grew quieter the higher he went. Even the creaks in the floorboards seemed to slow. When he reached the top, Imra was already there, kneeling by the window, watching a cloud the color of early tea. She looked over and nodded. No surprise, no questions, just welcome. Loen sat beside her. The cloud hovered nearby. It pulsed gently, as if breathing. Within it, faint images formed, a cup being filled, a hand reaching out, a soft laugh muffled by a scarf. Imra passed him a page. No words, just a soft charcoal pencil. Write what it feels like, she whispered. Loen stared. He didn't know how to describe it. Not really, but he tried. Warm like holding something you didn't expect to miss. Soft like a thank you someone forgot to say. Slow like walking through rain without a coat and not minding. He passed the paper back. Imra read it once, then smiled, just barely. "Clouds remember," she said. "We help them settle." That day, they read 6 clouds. Each held something different. One smelled like bread and lavender, a memory of a kitchen long gone. Another flickered with light, like lightning caught in a jar. A story of fear turned into courage. One didn't show anything at all, just floated quietly past. "Some stories aren't ready yet," Imra said. When they finished, Imra placed each page into a cloth folder, wrapped it in soft windcloth, and set it beside a glowing blue book on a shelf. She turned to Loen. "Would you like to come back tomorrow?" He nodded. No words, just a smile, and that was enough. As he walked down the ramp, Loen looked out the window. The clouds drifted slowly by, each one a soft chapter, unfolding at its own pace. Below him, the village turned sleepily. Chimes rang once, then settled. The wind carried the scent of something baking, and from the top of the tower, the cloud reader watched the sky as the sky watched her back. In the center of Aeloria, just past the garden of wind chimes, stood a small tower made of stone, covered in moss and memories. At its top was a clock, not large, not proud, just a simple face with no numbers and hands that moved whenever they pleased. It was called the clock that forgot time, and in Aeloria, that was not considered a flaw, but a kindness. The villagers didn't use the clock to schedule things. They used it to feel things. When the minute hand turned slowly, it meant the day was meant for resting. When it paused completely, people knew it was time to listen, to the wind, to the sky, or to someone they hadn't truly heard in a while. On rare occasions, the clock would spin in quiet, graceful circles, and everyone would gather in the center of the village, not to panic, but to celebrate the passing of something they didn't yet understand. The tower's keeper was a soft-spoken man named Thalen. He wore thick glasses and a coat with far too many pockets. Inside each pocket was a small object, a pebble that felt like morning, a scrap of ribbon that hummed, a feather from a bird that never flew but always dreamed. Thalen didn't fix the clock. He simply sat with it. Each day, he climbed the creaky spiral stairs, set down a warm cup of mist tea, and whispered to the clock about his dreams. Not to make the clock move, but to help it feel less alone. Loen had always been fascinated by the tower. As a child, he used to sit on the cobblestones below it, watching the clock's hands drift, pause, spin, and drift again. One morning, after his visit with Imra the Cloud Reader, he wandered up to the tower. Thalen was already there, perched on a stool beside the clock face, gently polishing the rim with a cloth that smelled of rosemary and rain. He looked over his shoulder. "Come to listen, or come to speak?" Loen blinked. "Can I do both?" Thalen smiled. "Best way to do it." They sat together for a while. The air was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the wooden beams and the low hum of the clock, a sound like a sigh between seconds. Thalen sipped his tea. "People think clocks are meant to tell time, but this one, it feels time instead." Loen watched the hands. They weren't pointing to anything in particular, just gently swaying like reeds in a sleepy river. "Doesn't that confuse people?" he asked. Thalen chuckled softly. "In Aeloria, we don't need time to tell us when to begin or stop. We just are." He pointed to a small inscription on the clock's edge, It read, "When the moment matters, it will wait for you." Loen leaned back against the wall. His eyelids were heavy. The clock's hum grew deeper, slower, almost like a lullaby. "What happens if the clock ever stops completely?" he asked. Thalen thought for a moment. "Then the village listens more carefully." He paused, then added, "And maybe, just maybe, the world lets out a breath it's been holding." As the afternoon light slanted through the tower windows, Thalen reached into one of his many coat pockets and pulled out a tiny glass orb. Inside, it shimmered with faint swirls of gold and gray. "This," he said, "is a minute I once lost." Loen tilted his head. "A minute?" Thalen nodded. "Long ago, I was sitting right here, thinking about someone I missed, and before I knew it, a whole minute slipped away. Didn't even notice it pass. So I caught it," he continued, "before it could disappear completely." He handed it to Loen. The orb was warm. "Keep it," Thalen said. "You never know when you'll need a minute back." When Loen left the tower, the clock chimed once. Not loud, just a single rounded tone, like the clink of a spoon in a cup of tea. The villagers nearby paused briefly, closed their eyes, and smiled. Then the moment passed, as all moments do. Not hurried, not held, just released, like a bird that knows exactly where it's going, even if no one else does. That evening, as Aeloria drifted across a quiet sky, Loen sat on the driftway and held the glass orb in his hand. It pulsed gently, not with time, but with presence. He didn't open it. Not yet. He didn't need to, because for now, the moment had already waited, just for him. And far above the sleeping world, bathed in silver-blue dusk, the clock that forgot time continued to hum, softly, steadily, without ever once asking to be understood. Not everything in Aeloria was quiet all the time. There were places, soft, warm ones, where a different kind of hush lived. Not the silence of stillness, but the gentle murmur of things meant to be heard softly. One of those places was the Whisper Market. It only opened when the wind turned in just the right way. You couldn't find it with your eyes. You had to listen for it. The rustle of canopies made from woven cloud cloth, the shuffle of footsteps on moss-covered wood, the hush of vendors speaking in voices no louder than a sigh. The market floated near the center of the village, just above the lowest layer of cloud. Sometimes it was invisible, hidden in mist like a daydream you almost remembered. But when it appeared, it shimmered. Canopies fluttered gently overhead, painted in soft colors like bruised peaches and faded twilight. Tables were made from driftwood and glass, each one glowing faintly from underneath. The items sold at the Whisper Market were not like those found in the world below. You wouldn't find apples or coins, but instead, bottled breezes, each with a memory of a place you've never been. Sleepy music that only played when you closed your eyes. Socks that always stayed warm but never too warm. Candles scented like forgotten lullabies. Envelopes sealed with giggles. Invisible marbles that made no sound but felt perfectly round in your palm. And the most popular item of all, whispers. Whispers were sold in tiny jars, their corks sealed with wax that glowed softly in moonlight. Each jar held a voice, not shouting, not singing, but saying something simple and small, something meant only for you. Some jars whispered reminders. You are safe now. You did enough today. It's okay to let go. Others told the first lines of stories never written. There was once a fox who painted stars. Somewhere beyond the tide, A clock is waiting for you, and some jars were just sounds, the soft crunch of snow, the murmur of ocean inside a shell, a child's sleepy hum under a blanket. Loen first found the market on a morning wrapped in silver fog. He had been wandering without purpose, letting his feet follow the drift of his thoughts. Then he heard it. A hush, not like silence, but like secrets walking in bare feet. He followed the sound, past the cloud vine trellises, beyond the hushberry trees, and into a clearing that hadn't been there the day before. There it was, the Whisper Market. He walked slowly, his fingers trailing the fabric of the floating canopies, his eyes drinking in the faint glimmers of light beneath the tables. A vendor, with eyes the color of early dusk, waved him over. She wore a shawl stitched from old bedtime stories. "You're new," she whispered. Loen nodded. He wasn't sure if he should speak back. So he didn't. He simply smiled. The vendor reached under her table and pulled out a small jar wrapped in sea thread. She held it up to his ear. Inside, a whisper floated gently. "You are made of softness the world cannot unmake." Loen closed his eyes. The words settled in him like a pebble falling slowly to the bottom of a still pond. He bought the jar, not with coins, but with a memory. That's how payment worked in the Whisper Market. You didn't give money. You gave moments. Loen offered a small smile he once gave his mother on a rainy morning years ago when the world outside was gray, but her arms had made it golden. The vendor accepted. She tucked the memory away inside a folded paper crane and bowed. "Come back any time," she whispered. "The wind knows your name now." As Loen left the market, he held the jar close. It glowed faintly through the fog, a soft reminder in a world that didn't rush. He didn't open it again that day. He just kept it near, in his pocket, on his nightstand, next to his heart. And that night, when the stars curled in closer and the village leaned gently into a new layer of cloud, Loen drifted off with the whisper still echoing softly inside him. "You are made of softness the world cannot unmake." Above him, the Whisper Market faded from sight. The canopies fluttered once, then vanished like fog in morning sun. But its hush lingered. In the bells, in the trees, in the breath of Aeloria itself. On a quiet street near the edge of Aeloria, just past a lantern tree that blinked like a sleepy firefly, stood a house. Not an unusual house by day. At first glance, it looked like all the others. Thatched roof, windows open to the breeze, a garden of soft wind chimes lining the porch. But when night fell, the house changed, not loudly, not in bursts of magic or smoke. It shifted gently, like a dream remembering itself. Some nights it became a cottage made of seashells. The walls shimmered softly, and the air smelled of distant tides. Other nights, the house stretched tall, its windows blinking like stars, each one revealing a different memory. A child's first laugh, the moment someone forgave themselves, the stillness before a kiss. Occasionally, it would vanish entirely, not gone, but dreaming, sleeping deeper than even the clouds dared to follow. When the villagers called it the Whispering Home, they spoke of it kindly, never too loudly, as though they feared waking it. And no one lived there permanently. It was not a house for staying. It was a house for visiting, when you needed something, but didn't know what. Loen had passed by the house many times. He liked to sit on the stone wall across the lane, watching the shadows inside shift and curl like smoke from a candle. He never dared step in, not until the night it became a library of rain. He had been walking the driftway, jar of whispers in his pocket, mind wrapped in clouds, when he noticed the sound. Not thunder, not storm, just rain. Soft, warm, indoor rain, falling gently within the walls of the house, its rhythm like fingers tapping the surface of a dream. Loen stepped closer. The door opened. No creak, no wind, just invitation. He entered. Inside, the house had no furniture, only books. Thousands of them, stacked and floating, resting gently in the air like dandelion seeds. The rain fell quietly from the ceiling, disappearing before it reached the floor. It didn't wet the books, didn't stain the walls. It simply existed. Loen reached for a book at random. Its cover was blank. Inside, there were only a few sentences. This is a story about someone who waited, not because they were patient, but because they still believed something good would come. He opened another. There is a kind of love that never asks to be named. It only lingers, warm as a coat you didn't know someone left behind. The rain whispered on. Loen wandered from shelf to shelf, book to book, each one holding something small but true. None of the stories had endings, only beginnings, and middles that made you want to pause. At the center of the room was a large cushion. It looked like it had been waiting for him forever. He sat. The rain fell gently through the beams above. A candle flickered to life beside him. From somewhere, a soft voice spoke. It wasn't a person. It was the house. Stay as long as you need. Leave when your heart feels lighter. No sooner, no later. Loen closed his eyes. He let the hush settle around him. The stories, the rain, the stillness. He remembered something he'd almost forgotten. A dream from long ago, of a place where even shadows smiled. He didn't speak, didn't move. The cushion cradled him. The rain softened. The candle stayed warm. And the house changed again. Not in shape, not in size, but in knowing. It had listened, and that was enough. When Loen finally rose, he felt taller, but also softer. As he stepped outside, the sky was painted in twilight lavender. The house behind him blinked once, a window opening, then closing, like the slow nod of a friend who understands. He walked home quietly. The lantern swayed gently above. The wind kissed his cheek like an old lullaby, and when he looked back, the house was gone. But in Aeloria, nothing is truly lost. It simply waits until it's needed again. The house would return, different maybe, but always listening, always welcoming, always home. Every village has a bakery, but only one has a bakery like the one in Aeloria. Tucked between two buildings that always leaned in like old friends, stood a small round shop with a chimney that puffed sleepy curls of cinnamon and stardust. Its sign swayed gently in the wind, painted with a single word, Mira's. But most people called it the bakery that baked dreams. Mira, the baker, was short and round, with hands always dusted in flour and eyes that glowed like embers under moonlight. She didn't follow recipes. She followed feelings. Her shelves were filled not just with loaves and cakes, but with emotions turned edible. You could walk in and ask for a slice of calm, a roll of clarity, or a tart filled with something you can't name but miss anyway. Mira would smile, wipe her hands on her cloud-colored apron, and begin mixing. Each dream had its own scent. There was the loaf of letting go, warm and soft, with the faint taste of lavender and lemon. The crust of confidence, crunchy on the outside, tender inside, with a hidden pocket of honey. And Mira's favorite, the muffin of maybe, made for those who weren't sure what they needed, but came in anyway. Loen had passed by the shop many times, always tempted by the scent, but too uncertain to step inside, until one morning when he woke with a weight in his chest, not heavy, just full, like a thought that had overstayed its welcome. The bakery door opened before he touched it. Mira looked up. "Something warm," she said, before he could even speak, "and a little crumbly around the edges." Loen blinked. "How did you—" "I bake feelings, remember?" She winked and motioned him to sit. He took a stool by the window. Outside, the village drifted slowly across a sea of sunrise. Clouds rolled past like lazy blankets. Mira hummed as she worked. Her kitchen was a quiet symphony, mixing bowls that stirred themselves, ovens that glowed with gentle blue flames, jars labeled not with ingredients, but with names like nostalgia, serenity, and hope. She pulled something from the oven, a single bun, round and golden, steam curling from the top like a sigh. "Here," she said. "This is what you needed before you even knew." Loen bit into it. It was soft, like the moment before a hug. It tasted faintly of apples and the warmth of sitting beside someone you trust, without needing to speak. He closed his eyes, swallowed slowly, and exhaled. Mira sat across from him. "People think dreams are only for night, but I bake them for mornings, because sometimes you need a soft beginning before the day can begin." Loen looked at her. "Do you bake your own dreams?" Mira smiled. "No, I bake others, and in return, they leave behind crumbs, and those crumbs, they're enough for me." Around the shop, jars began to glow faintly. Some pulsed pink, others shimmered gold. One blinked blue like a sleepy eye. "Those are dream leftovers," she said. "Little bits of someone's sigh, a giggle that didn't make it into a sentence, a yawn too kind to interrupt." Loen looked around. The warmth wasn't just from the oven. It came from the stories the bakery carried, in every loaf, every swirl of spice, every flake of sugar kissed by wind. He stood, feeling lighter, not empty, but full of something soft and slow. Mira packed him a second bun. "Not for now," she said, "for when you need a moment to come back to." She tied it with a string made of air. "Come by again, even if you're full," she added, "especially then." Outside, the sun was yawning over the clouds. Aeloria glowed like a teacup held up to the light. Loen took a deep breath. The bun warmed his hands through the cloth. It smelled faintly of belonging. He didn't look back at the shop. He didn't need to. The scent stayed with him, as did the feeling. And far behind him, Mira hummed and began to bake another dream. This one shaped like a small, gentle yes. On the quietest edge of Aeloria, where the driftway curved like a question mark, sat a single wooden chair. It was old, but not tired. Faded, but never forgotten. And though no one claimed it, everyone knew it belonged to the stars. They called it the stargazer's chair. It didn't face the village, or the lanterns, or the houses. It faced only the sky, high, wide, and full of quiet possibilities. The chair never moved. It was never cleaned. No one mended its frayed arms or polished its weathered slats, because somehow it stayed perfect, just as it was. A place made for stillness. Some said it was carved by the first person who ever looked up and wondered. Others believed it simply appeared one night when the stars needed someone to listen to them. And in Aeloria, things like that just happened. Loen discovered the chair when he was younger. He had wandered away during a celebration, the kind with soft music and glowing fruit. and followed the curve of the clouds until he found the chair waiting. Alone, but not lonely. He sat, and the sky felt closer. That night, the stars pulsed a little brighter, and though he didn't understand it then, he knew the chair had shown him something quiet and wide and wonderful. Now, years later, Loen returned more often. He didn't always sit. Sometimes he just stood nearby, feeling the chair hum in his bones like the memory of a lullaby. But tonight, he sat. The sky above was deep navy, splashed with freckles of light. A slow breeze passed through, softening the air like a quilt being unfolded. From where he sat, the stars didn't seem far. They felt like lanterns someone had hung up just for him. And somehow, he knew they were watching back. Loen leaned into the chair's curve. It fit him perfectly. Not because it was made for him, but because it had been waiting for someone who looked at the night not with questions, but with comfort. He closed his eyes, let the wind rest on his shoulders, and that's when the sky began to speak, not in words, not in sound, but in warmth, in weightless hush. He saw memories not his own. A girl balancing on the edge of a dream, a wolf made of starlight chasing its tail, a hand reaching into the dark and finding another, a lullaby hummed across galaxies, a comet carrying someone's last wish. Each vision passed gently, like clouds across the face of the moon, and with each one, Loen's breath slowed, his shoulders softened, his heart unfolded. A star blinked above him, not a shooting star, just one, bright and pulsing like it had something to say. Loen whispered, "I hear you." The star blinked again, twice, then once, then stilled. A reply, not to be understood, just felt. The stargazer's chair creaked quietly beneath him, not from age, but from memory, because everyone who sat in the chair left something behind, a thought, a hope, a sigh, and in return, they took something soft and old and infinite. Loen stood, the night wrapped gently around him. He placed a hand on the chair's back, thanked it not with words, but with a feeling. Then he turned, leaving the chair to its watching, its whispering, its skyward resting. Behind him, the chair remained still, waiting for the next dreamer, the next listener, the next quiet soul who would look up and find not stars, but stories. In Aeloria, endings were never sad. They were soft, like the last page of a good book, like a candle going out after everyone is already asleep, like a cloud passing behind the moon. And once a year, when the season turned quietly, the villagers gathered to celebrate all the little things that had drifted away, stories, dreams, people, even pieces of themselves. They called it the Farewell Festival. It wasn't loud. There were no fireworks or horns. No one shouted or danced wildly. Instead, the entire village lit lanterns, not the usual glowing ones from the garden, but delicate paper ones, each folded by hand, each carrying a whisper, a wish, or a goodbye. The festival took place on the night of slow stars, when the sky moved a little more gently and the stars seemed to shimmer with understanding. That evening, Loen stood at the edge of the lantern lake, a wide, still patch of mist where clouds curled like lazy water and the wind barely stirred. He held his lantern gently. It was shaped like a moth, its wings painted with soft strokes of blue. Inside, he had tucked a note. Just a few words. "Thank you for waiting, even when I didn't know I was coming." One by one, the villagers arrived. Mira, from the bakery, brought muffins shaped like moons. Thalen from the clock tower carried a pouch of old seconds, ready to release them into the sky. Ina, the lantern keeper, walked barefoot, her own lantern trailing behind her like a memory with wings. Even Imra, the cloud reader, came. She carried no lantern, just her silence and a smile that said enough. When the sky darkened into velvet, the village grew still. No words, no movement, just presence. Then, all at once, the lanterns were lifted. Some floated immediately, eager to rise. Others hovered as if lingering a little longer, all of them glowing gently. They carried laughter, hushed goodbyes, wishes wrapped in folds of hope, and the sky took them, not with haste, but with care. Loen watched his moth lantern rise slowly. It turned in the air, dipping slightly, then catching the wind like a sigh finding a place to land. He closed his eyes. He felt every chapter, the cloud paths, the bell gardens, the whisper jars, the changing house, the chair that listened, the moments that glowed but never shouted, and above all, he felt stillness, not absence, not emptiness, but a quiet fullness that comes only when everything is exactly as it should be. A song began, not sung, but hummed. A lullaby passed from villager to villager. No words, no tempo, just the tune of people letting go. Gently. The sky responded, stretching wide, accepting every lantern like a parent pulling blankets over dreaming children. The festival ended without a signal, not because it was over, but because it had become part of the night itself. Villagers drifted home, their feet quiet, their hearts lighter. Loen stayed a little longer. His lantern was gone now, just a tiny speck in the stars, but somehow it glowed warmer than any other. He turned to leave. The wind followed, softly rustling behind him, like pages closing themselves. And Aeloria drifted on, above the sleeping world, above the ticking clocks and tangled thoughts, above even the clouds sometimes. The village didn't need to be remembered. It only needed to be visited, in dreams, in stillness, in stories whispered before sleep. And whenever someone needed it, truly needed it, Aeloria would be there, waiting, listening, floating, in the place just above the sky and just below a dream.